This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, but rocking a gorgeous, beautiful Toronto background behind me as we still got some snow on the ground, but we are getting near April with spring on the way. But here we are on March the 26th, 2025. And folks, I have a wonderful guest on the show with me today that I'm trying to book for a long time now, and we finally made it happen. And we are celebrating for a guy that's 39 years old. I don't know how this happens because this movie here is 55 years old, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Yes, I love this movie. Now, I was born in 1972, so I
God.
was -2 when this came out,
Oh,
I've had a few guests from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls on the show. I've had Harrison Page has been on here. The gorgeous Dolly Reed Martin's been on here.
I love
Mark,
Dolly.
oh,
Uh,
I love Dolly as
I
well.
will I will send you pictures of Dolly and I together. We recently did an autograph show together, and we do often. We are paired together.
Oh, she's beautiful. And I've had Marcia McBroom on here a couple of
Marshall Falk.
times. Oh,
Yes,
yeah. And of course, Marcia, talk about a domino effect, led me to her three sisters. One I haven't had quite on yet, but two of her sisters. And that led to Apache Ramos from the Warriors
mm.
and domino effect, domino effect. So, folks, I have a wonderful guest today. He is a dancer. He's he's had a career, folks. Folks, I give you the awesome Christopher Riordan. How do you do, Christopher?
How do you do? Finally, we meet.
And your last name is Irish, and you say it's not a Nick of Irish in you, huh?
Oh, well, I was adopted, so I
Okay.
only found out. I think I was in my beginning 60s when I found out what my heritage really is.
You were
So,
in your 60s when you found that out.
yes,
Oh, wow.
yes.
What was your reaction to finding that out?
I was just happy, mainly because I wanted to know, I wanted my son to know what he was. That was important to me. So, yeah.
Is your son a dancer too? Because I know you've
No.
got quite the career in it.
It really stopped, believe me. No, he's not at all a dancer.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you, you've got quite the number of credits, and you're not even my first guest from Viva Las Vegas on here, you know. So I mean, this is amazing because I've had Tony Basil and Cynthia Pepper on from that film. So
Well, Cynthia wasn't in Viva Las Vegas. Cynthia was in Kissin' Cousins.
oh yes, she was. You are right. You
Yes.
are right. I That was my mistake. Yeah, I knew she was in an Elvis movie, so. But
Yes.
Tony Basil, yes. And speaking of dancers, what a thrill to have Tony on here. She was on here on in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, but she was on here on Valentine's Day. I used to hate Valentine's Day until Tony Basil come on my show, and now it's like,
Mm.
yeah, she makes
Well,
Valentine's Day special.
Cynthia and I have been friends since 1960.
Yeah,
And
wow.
we
A lot of
still,
great movies come out in 1960.
yes, and we speak on the phone quite frequently, and we often do Elvis events together. We've done them in Las Vegas, Canada, everywhere. We just appear together often.
Wow. Well, she was a wonderful guest on here, I'll tell you that. She was wonderful and talked a lot. And of course, Mindy Miller, I haven't got booked on here yet. Um, she, of course, was involved with Elvis as well. So anyway, I'm forgetting a name of a person here. I read your background and I'm forgetting a name of a person, but I don't think you'll forget this person because I wanted to touch onto this person because when I was 4 years old, I didn't know what I wanted to be. So when I read of, and I've heard these stories before with guests on here, that they were discovered at 4 years old, or you got into the business at 4 years old. I was I didn't even want to leave home at 4 years old. I had to go to kindergarten kicking and screaming when I
Oh,
was five, you know? So when I learned that somebody was discovered and got the bug that young, I'm trying to remember, and you'll have to correct me because I read this recently, the person that discovered you.
well, are you talking about at 4?
Ye-
I wouldn't consider myself discovered at 4. I just happened to start performing at 4. But I would consider the people that discovered me, that
Mhm.
pushed my career, would be Fred Astaire and Hermes Pan, who was Fred's choreographer.
Okay, there now that well, Fred Astaire was not the name I was looking for, but yeah, I definitely oh, okay. Leslie Peterson, that is the
Oh,
name I'm looking for.
Leslie Peterson had seen me, I don't remember what year, and
Okay.
I obviously had to have been in my probably my first teens because when I went to MGM, I ran away from home when I was 18, and I went to MGM, and Leslie Peterson was a producer at MGM.
Hmm.
So I went up to to the administration office, 18 years old and just dumb as a stump, very naive. And I said, I want to see Leslie Peterson. And they said, well, he's on the third floor or whatever. So I went to his office and his secretary said, do you have an appointment? She looked at me very strangely. And I said, no, but he said if I was ever in town to look him up. And so she was very, very sweet. And she went in and talked to him and came out with a very different look on her face and said, Mr. Peterson will be out in a moment. And so in the meantime, I always tell this story. While she was in his office, I noticed there was an Oscar on her desk. So I picked it up to look at it, and it was the best picture of 1932, Grand Hotel, which is a fantastic film if you've ever seen it. You know, it had both Barrymores and Greta Garbo and Joan Crawford, but it was loose at the base. And when she came back out, the secretary and I said, you know, you really ought to have this fixed or take better care of it. So, it's a stupid, 18-year-old kid. Anyway, Mr. Peterson came out and was very gracious. And I went into his office. We had a very long talk. I was really surprised that we talked so long. And then finally he said, let me call Al Honorato. And at that time, Al Honorato was head of casting at Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios. And they asked me if I belonged to the union. And I thought they meant equity, which I did belong to. I had never even heard of Screen Actors Guild. I had no idea what that was. As I said, I was 18 and very green. And they figured out that I could get by doing something called the Taft-Hartley law. So I got in somehow. They took care of the whole thing, but they did tell me that I had to join Screen Actors Guild within 2 weeks, otherwise I'd never have another chance at joining. And they put me in a limousine and drove me across the street on lot two, and I began working in a film called Somebody Up There Likes Me with another newcomer by the name of Paul Newman.
Yep.
And, and I was very lucky because Robert Wise was the director of that film, and
Oh yeah,
the
yep.
minute he saw me, he said, "Oh, yes, I have something for him." So that was the beginning, and it's
Wa-
I've never looked back since.
Wow. And of course, Robert Wise is was very successful. Paul Newman, we lost not too many years ago,
Right.
and yeah, I think it's funny when you say newcomer because of course, when you're me, you think these people just around forever.
Yes. That was Somebody Up There Likes Me was his second film, my
Well,
first and his second.
somebody up there obviously like you.
Evidently, yes. Yeah. I've done 67 films after that. So,
67 films. Well, I'm going to tell you, you got involved with dance, which is something that, they cops will keep me off the dance floor because it keeps people from being injured. I'm a horrible dancer, but
um,
but I admire people that can do it. And of course, you mentioned Fred Astaire, like that guy was all over the place. And of course, I remember the story when John Travolta did Saturday Night Fever. He wanted to be filmed during the big dance scene, his full body, so that there was no question that it
yeah,
was him. And
right.
of course, that idea came from, of course, Fred Astaire,
That's correct.
who wanted his full body shot
Yes,
so that people would never ever question that it was Fred Astaire.
exactly.
What was your impressions of meeting Fred Astaire?
Oh my God, that's a long story.
Yeah.
I uh, I had to promise a friend of mine that I would show up and meet Hermes Pan. I had worked with this friend of mine. She was a producer, and she said to me, "I want you to go to this dance studio in Hollywood and meet Hermes Pan, who's just coming in from Rome. He's been choreographing the film Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor."
Oh, yeah.
And I said to her, I'm not of that caliber. I couldn't possibly audition for Hermes Pan. And she said to me, "You go there, or we're never speaking to you again." Well, I didn't have much choice by then. As I said, we'd become friends, and I didn't want to lose a friend. So I showed up. And of course, I had grown up seeing Hermes' name on the screen. I didn't know whether Hermes Pan was a man or a woman. I mean, that name doesn't tell you much. Uh, I was really put to ease immediately by this lovely gentleman who turned out to be one of my dearest friends. But I was scared, and I didn't think I was qualified. And so I just kept trying to talk to him. And finally, he said, "Well, I think you better go and change and then come back and let's see what you can do." So I went into the dressing room and I changed into some dance clothes. And I came out and I started warming up at the bar. And all of a sudden, looked in the mirror there and I saw the door open to this dance studio. And who do you suppose is walking in the front door but Fred Astaire? And I'm literally looking for a window to crawl out of. I'm really scared to death. I thought, oh, this is going to be so embarrassing. It's just awful. But they let me warm up for a little while, and then Mr. Astaire gave me this, "Come on over here." And I thought, now this is going to be the nicest rejection I've ever had, I'm sure, because he was such a gentleman. And he's talking to me in this way that I was very confused. I didn't know what is he saying. And finally I got it that he is telling me that he wants me to partner his last partner. And I said to him, "Are you sure, Mr. Astaire?" I said, "Because I'm not really a dancer," because I'd always considered myself as an actor. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Kid, you're a dancer." So he said, "Can you hang around a minute?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And of course, I'm stunned. I'm in shock at this point. He got on the phone to first to Barry Chase, who was his last partner, and I heard her on the phone say, "I can't come down now, Fred. If he's good enough for you, he's good enough for me." So then he turned to me and he said, "I've got to call William Morris." So he gets on the phone to William Morris, and then he's chatting away a bit, and then he puts his hand on the speaker and he turns to me and he says, "Is 500 a week rehearsal and 1,000 a week performance, is that good enough for you?" Now, mind you, this is the beginning of 1962.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good money, you know.
Hmm.
And so before you knew it, I was hired to replace Fred Astaire, as the partner for Barry Chase. And we started at the Sahara Hotel in Las Vegas. And then from there, Hermes would called me and said, "Oh, we're going to do one of the numbers on the Hollywood Palace, and then we're going to do one of the numbers on this or that or whatever." But when we did this show in Las Vegas, first of all, the opening night, I looked out the curtains and it looked like the entire roster of MGM stars were sitting out there. And the same thing happened the last night. And then on the last night, there was a party given. And Hermes came up to me and said, "Now, where are you going from here?" And I said, I'm just going back to LA. I said, "I have a nice little bungalow there and I'll just go back and start looking for work again." And he said, "Well, I'm going to be doing a movie." He said, "Would you like to work with me again?" Well, who wouldn't want to work with Hermes Pan, you know? So I said, "Sure." And then, you know, what happens at parties, people come up and they interrupt and you go off here and you go off there. And finally, Hermes came back to me and he said, "I'm leaving now, but I'm going to call you when you're back in LA, give you a couple of days." I said, "Okay." And he starts to leave, going out the door. And I said, "Oh, Pan, by the way, what's the name of this movie?" And he says, "It's called My Fair Lady." So I ended up spending 6.5 months working on My Fair Lady.
You know, it's interesting you say that because a lot of times when people have passed away, I do tribute interviews on here. I've had Alfred Hitchcock's granddaughter on here,
Hmm.
and one of the tributes I have done was I had Audrey Hepburn's eldest son on here.
Sean,
Yeah.
my
And
son is named after him.
oh wow, really?
Yes, yes. Sean was very ill in the beginning of the shooting of Fair Lady. And one day I said to Audrey, "How is Sean?" And she was so touched. She said, "You know, you're the only person who has asked me about him." And of course, she went through, a couple of miscarriages before she really delivered Sean. And so during the course of the film, my wife and I had gone to a wedding party, which was in further south of Los Angeles. And coming back on the freeway, we were hit by a car. And so on Monday morning, when I showed up, I guess my face showed that I was very concerned about something. And Audrey said, "What's the matter? I can tell that something is bothering you." And I told her that, we'd had an accident. And, my wife was pregnant at that time. And she would ask from time to time, "How is your wife?" And finally, at the end of the shoot, Jack Warner gave a huge party for Audrey. And it took up an entire soundstage because there was just everybody that had worked on the film was invited. And these kids came up to me, a couple of the dancers, and they said, "Has Audrey found you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, she's looking for you. She's asking about you." And I said, "I haven't seen her." And all of a sudden, I looked up and I saw her exiting the doors with her husband at the time, Mel Ferrar. And she saw me and you could just tell it was like all of a sudden we were 2 feet apart instead of 2 miles apart. And she came through the crowd and came up to me and she said, "I'm so glad I found you. I just want you to know that I will be praying that your baby will be born healthy and whole." And I said, "If it's a boy, I'll name him Sean." And pardon me, I get a little choked up. And with that, she gave me a kiss on the cheek, patted me, we waved, and she left. And when Sean was born, I sent her a note in Switzerland and told her that Sean Ronald Riordan was born January 7th, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was the first interview I did out of Rome.
Oh,
And
really?
I, yeah, back then I was doing them at the station. I
Mhm.
started doing them here on Zoom whenever the pandemic had hit. One of my
Um,
guests had told me about this, and this is so much more convenient because I could just do them out of my apartment, and
mhm.
fool people into thinking I'm outside with cherry blossom behind me. But yeah, Sean was great, and we talked about Audrey and I remember one of the things he said to me, he said, Audrey was one of these people who would prefer to do one singular thing right than a bunch of things wrong,
Oh,
which means,
yes.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. I'm just sorry that I have never been able to meet him because I would love to tell him that story that I just told you.
You know what? If I still have his info, I'll send it to you. I don't know what I have of his. I'll look into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was in 2017, I think I had him on. So, but it was the first time I had called Rome, and that was
Mm.
in the States, or either that or he called me, one or the other. I don't remember, but
Yeah.
but nonetheless, it was pretty cool to do a tribute on Audrey Hepburn, and she has, of course, had quite the career. And of course, My Fair Lady, I had the pleasure a few years ago of seeing that screened, you know. I've often said of My Fair Lady, it was the film that got uh, there's a trope in movies that I never understood. Um, She's All That got it wrong with Rachel Lee Cook. Um, in uh, what was House Bunny? My partner in crime is here. Skittles.
Ah,
He can't dance either.
uh,
Skittles can't dance either, but he's a doll from the valley. Aren't you, Skittles? But I remember because I got a big Emma Stone crush, and she was in the movie The House Bunny. And I always found it funny. They'll take these women, they'll put glasses on them, put them in ponytails and overalls, and they'll try to tell you that they're plain. And then by the end of the movie, they discover they're beautiful. And of course, with Rachel Lee Cook and Emma Stone, I wasn't fooled. I knew they were beautiful, you
mhm.
know? The only time I seen that trope done right was My Fair Lady.
Really?
Yep. And I'll tell you why. Because it wasn't about making Audrey Hepburn beautiful. See, the title says My Fair Lady. Lady. There's some symbolism in that one word because it's about turning this homeless woman into a lady. It's about attitudes. It's not about making her beautiful.
Right.
The
That's true.
detail was transforming her personality. So I thought My Fair Lady was the one movie I could think of that actually got that right. Because a lot
Hmm.
of these movies, it's like, yeah, you're trying to fool me by putting somebody in glasses and
Yeah.
overalls and stuff. I'm not fooled, you know?
Yeah.
So, My Fair Lady got that right. And of course, got to work with George Cukor. I hope I did screw his last name up. The
Q-core.
director.
It's
Oh,
Q.
Cukor. Okay. Of course, another highlight director, you know. Um, Talk about working with him.
Well, he was quite wonderful, and he took a shine to me because I'd say Hermes and I fooled him. Um, George did not want anyone in the film that was not really English. So when he met me, Hermes said, just give him one of your English accents, because I used to do a lot of accents, and I have played English many, many times. So for whatever reason, I don't know what hit me, but I gave him a Cockney accent. And George lit up and he said, "Oh, I could use him in the beginning. I have just the thing for him in the beginning." Now, mind you, we shot the film in sequence, which is seldom done. So the first part is in Covent Garden, and I'm one of the vendors there selling God knows what. But I had seen Audrey, of course, on the lot because actually Hermes had hired me to be part of the skeleton crew for the number Ascot. Now I was to come in and teach 20 people how to move a certain way and the lyrics of the Ascot Gavotte. And then the next week we'd have 20 more come in and 20 more and 20 more until we reached, I think it was something like 240 dancers. So I had seen Audrey, just being casual of their ponytail and shorts sometimes and so on. But then the very first day of shooting, when she was dressed in rags and had dirt on her face and everything, I was quite surprised to see her looking like that. Of course, she was quite surprised to see me looking the way I look too. There's a funny story about that if you care to hear about it.
Sure, sure, go for it, please.
Um, the costume people were a little concerned about how I looked. They they thought that I looked a little too clean. So they said, we're going to have to take him in front of George and get an approval on this. And Mr. Cukor had had actual dirt from Covent Garden put into vials and shipped to the United States so that that dirt would be put on our faces and our fingers and our arms and everything else. So these people took me out right on the set and everybody's waiting. And I'm thinking, my God, they're all waiting for me. This is something else. And Mr. Cukor looks me up and down and he says, no, he needs more. So they took me in the back and they ripped my clothes a little more and put a little more dirt on my face and sprayed me with water so I looked like I was perspiring. Took me out again, shook his head, said, needs more. So they took me in the back again. They brought me out for the third time. And Mr. Cukor looked me up and down and he said, well, you can't ruin a pretty face. So, so that was my first day of shooting on My Fair Lady.
Well, you know what? It's a great movie. I always remember the scene where Audrey Hepburn has the scene where she's got the marbles in her mouth and she's like,
Yes.
"I swallowed one."
Yeah. That's all right. I have more. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, you know. What I find interesting with your career, you know, like it's to me it'd be like a dream, you know, the people you work with, because then you went on to work with Elvis Presley, you know, like I would have been 5 years old when he passed away,
Mm.
and I got a question. What's your favorite Elvis Presley song? Anybody that I know of that loves Elvis
Um,
Presley, I always ask, what's your favorite Elvis Presley song?
well, it's a song that he only did once, and it's not the usual, rock and roll thing. It's
Mhm.
called "Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow?"
Nice song.
Yeah, I love that song, and I love the way he does it. But you have to realize, before I worked with Elvis, I worked with Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes, you did. I did jump ahead there, didn't I? Let's talk about Elizabeth Taylor. Could you mention Cleopatra? That was a movie that had quite the history. It still has that history as
Oh
being
yeah,
what they call a major financial flop, but
yeah,
in
yes,
hindsight, it's kind of renowned. Elizabeth Taylor was a very interesting person because I remember when she did Hot in the Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, originally the role was supposed to be for Grace Kelly. And Grace Kelly, gorgeous.
yes, beautiful woman.
Yeah. And of course, Elizabeth Taylor was brought in and she knocked it out of the park.
Yes,
Um,
she did.
yeah.
She did. Yeah, very much so. It's so funny. I always admired Elizabeth when I was a kid. I mean, how could you not? She was really so beautiful. Um, my first day on the set of Raintree County,
Mhm.
um, we were shooting in the month of March, and it's very cold in LA in March, especially at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I went over and I got a cup of coffee. And in those days, I didn't even drink coffee, but I wanted to hold it so that it would keep me warm. And all of a sudden, I sensed somebody was approaching me. And I looked up, and it was Elizabeth Taylor, age 25. And I literally just went,
I bet.
I couldn't believe how gorgeous she was. And the funny thing is that we our lives sort of intertwined until she left us. When I lived in Puerto Vallarta, I lived more or less across the street from her house. So yeah, she was with me for a long, long time. And I was there the night that she won her very first Oscar, sitting behind her. And as a matter of fact, with she and her then husband, Eddie Fisher, in the same limousine was Audrey Hepburn and Mel Ferrar. And I had not met her then, but I remember our cars were right next to each other. And I saw Audrey asking, because Elizabeth was waving, asking Elizabeth, who is that boy? Little did we know, that we would work together and have a very nice relationship.
It's interesting how many beautiful women were asking about you, these enchanting women. And it's like a fairy tale, and you live this. You gotta have a tingly feeling about you emotionally when you stop and you think about that because these weren't your typical women, and I'm not talking fame wise either,
No.
because we don't have typical movie stars today like we
No.
did back then,
And you're
Back
right.
then,
These are exceptional women. I mean, Elizabeth with her charities and everything, nothing like what you would expect from her. And Audrey, of course, I don't know if you've ever heard, but Billy Wilder said, "You've heard the saying, and God broke the mold." Well, in this instance, it's true. There will never, ever be another Audrey Hepburn. She was so unique, so wonderful, so loving, and just uh, incredible, absolutely incredible. I don't mind telling you that even though I was married, I was in love with Audrey Hepburn.
oh gee, I think everybody was,
And you're
you
right.
know.
I
Yeah.
was going to say that. Yeah. The only person I've ever heard of that wasn't in love with her, in the beginning anyway, was Humphrey Bogart. But he was in such pain and so ill at that time. But he ultimately came around and found her to be enchanting as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Audrey, of course, was also heavily into charities as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and people remember that. So,
yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, this is fascinating. The people that you were meeting at a young age, your Audrey Hepburns and your Elizabeth Taylors and your Fred Astaires, and of course Elvis Presley. Wow. As I mentioned, with Viva Las Vegas, I've had Tony Basil on here, and I remember that video for Oh Mickey. It's one of my favorite, all-time favorite music videos, and um, she was a fantastic choreographer as well. Um, Elvis Presley, of course, I've got this box set of CDs of his, greatest hits and whatnot. And of course, there was more, I think there's like four CDs in that, because he had so much out. So many great songs. Strangely enough, I think my favorite Elvis Presley song is Bossa Nova Baby. I don't know why I like that
Hmm.
song. It just sounds so funny. But anytime that was on the radio, especially growing up, I listened to it. So, but he's done so many great songs, and I even heard ones I'd never heard of before from that CD collection, like A Mess of Blues. I'd never heard until I listened to that collection.
Hmm.
But I remember Elvis Presley growing up, and of course, at 5 years old, I don't remember his death, but but
You're aware of the fact that I worked with him more than anyone else?
yes, absolutely. And uh, I know I got a friend of mine in Toronto, actually. His name is the Creepy Ghoul. That's what he goes by. He's got his own YouTube channel. He says he forbids anybody from saying anything negative about Elvis Aaron Presley.
Well, I quite agree because he
Yeah.
was very, very good to me. And
Hmm.
he knew I was raising my son by myself. He found that out. And he told somebody, unbeknownst to me, I think it was Lamar Fike,
Hmm.
he had told him that you call Christopher when we come to town to do a film. And if he's not busy, give him the details. If he is busy, tell him we'll see him on the next one. So I ended up doing 6 films, his first TV special, and as far as we know that we can count, I think there's about 8 documentaries. So that's quite a record, you know. But he asked. In fact, I asked one of his girlfriends. This was about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I asked her. I said, "Is it true that Elvis had a list of people that were to be called?" And I remember her laughing, and she said, "Oh yes, there was a list. But what you don't know is you were the only male on that list." So I'm kind of proud of that, and the fact that Lamar Fike told a writer who was doing a book on Elvis that Elvis had claimed that I was his favorite dancer. He always wanted to have me around. Well, I made him laugh for one thing, and I didn't treat him like he was the king, you know. Um, and I just said things off the top of my head that made him relax and made him laugh, and he enjoyed it. So we had a good time working on those films. They weren't the best films in the world, but they were a lot of fun.
What was it like being that close and seeing him dance?
Well, he wasn't really much of a dancer. You know, he was
Yeah,
a
but
mover.
a lot of people, when they think of Elvis, so they think of the hip shaking and this and
Yes.
that. Yeah, that is immediately something that seems to come to mind.
Well, he had great moves. There's no doubt
Mhm.
about that. They were terrific moves, and I could see why the girls thought he was very sexy and so on. And he was a beautiful man. He had beautiful skin. And of course, the fact that he dyed his hair black with those lovely blue eyes, I mean, how can you miss, you know?
Mhm.
But I didn't treat him special at all, and I think that's one of the things that he liked was that I was just me, and he liked that. So,
Talk about the friendship you formed with Cynthia Pepper that you had mentioned briefly earlier.
well, Cynthia and I belonged to a church group,
Hmm.
oddly enough, because I'm not really a very religious person. But years ago, Jane Russell had started a Hollywood Christian group, I think it was called.
Hmm.
Then she decided, well, there should be a group for the young people. And so it was Hollywood Life, was what it was called. And Cynthia was one of those members, and that's how we met. And we've just been friends ever since. That's
She's a
all.
lovely person. I was so honored to
Yeah,
have her come on here.
yeah, she's great. She's a lovely
Hmm.
girl. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a lot of fun when we talk with each other. So
Now, did you have any connection with Tony Basil when you were on Viva Las Vegas?
yes, I did. And if you've noticed, I've not said anything,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
but it's all in my book.
Okay. I've always been a big fan of hers. So okay. We won't dive into anything. I don't know. I'm ignorant to any of this. So but I know she was, of course, a fabulous dancer. I'm looking through your credits, and you've done quite a few films that I have seen. But one that comes to mind here that I didn't know you were part of, and I love this film, The Great Race, of course,
Oh,
cowboy dancer. So
yeah.
you were part of the saloon scene in that, huh?
Yes, yes. And again, Hermes Pan was the choreographer. And so I helped him with Dorothy Provine's number. You
Hmm.
shouldn't have, hadn't have, oughtn't have swung on me. But that was a fun film because of Jack Lemmon. God, what a
Oh my. I liked it. What Jack Lemmon in two roles. I mean, Jack Lemmon was so funny, I
yeah,
mean, Some Like It Hot, The
yeah.
Apartment, and of course, The Great Race. One of my favorite scenes, of course, was that huge pie fight, and you got poor Natalie Wood caught in the middle of that, all dressed elegantly, and I like it when she first gets hit with the pie and she's like, she rushes down there like, how dare you, Um,
That was the first film I did with Natalie. She's one of the first people I met when I came to town. And
hmm
later we did another film together called Penelope. But
hmm
she was great on the Great Race. I mean, she let Blake Edwards do anything he wanted with her, and she went along with everything. She was just great. I really enjoyed working with her. I'm very good friends with her sister, Lana, and
I would love to get her on here. I haven't made it happen yet. It's funny you mentioned Blake Edwards. Speaking of tribute interviews, I've had his daughter Jennifer on here.
oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. And
I,
yeah, because Blake has had a tremendous he was great at doing those slapstick comedies, and he was a master at it. But when we talked about the Great Race,
I did a film with him before the Great Race called "What Did You Do in the War, Daddy?"
yes, we talked about that. Yes.
Yeah, and that was I enjoyed working on that. Unfortunately, about in the middle of my work, I caught the chicken pox from my son, and I had to drop out. But he was great. I loved working with Blake. In fact, I almost did the party with him. I wanted to
Oh,
do
that
that.
was so fun.
Yeah, I really wanted to do that. But he changed his mind about that particular character, and somebody else did the part. But I wanted to do it. But I had been friends with Carol Wayne and Denny Miller and Claudine Langer, because Claudine came into the Hollywood Life church thing too at one point. So I had all those people there that I knew, but fate had something else in mind. So,
With the party, well, to me, every time I think of that movie, the scene with I mean, Peter Sellers is so outrageously funny and talented. But when I think of the party, I always think of that poor butler who, as the night kept going on, kept drinking and drinking.
yeah.
And the scene around the dinner table with that butler.
Well, Blake almost repeats himself in Victor Victoria with the same idea, with the waiter all of a sudden recognizing Julie Andrews' voice singing. And if you remember at the close to the end, he's so taken with her again, and he's got this cake in his hands that he's going to take to a table, and he trips over a little banister wall like and falls head over heels. So it's the same kind of idea, typical
Yeah.
Blake Edwards. I loved his work, and if you look at his early TV work, he was brilliant. He was a wonderful director and
Yeah.
lovely to work with because he understood actors. He
Hmm.
just he knew how to convey his ideas.
Yeah, and Jennifer worked on a few films with him as well, so I got to hear about that. She was an SOB,
Mm.
which was pretty funny. Yeah, Blake was great, and he really understood that type of comedy.
Yes.
Even
Yeah.
though he didn't always do that type of film, but that was what he was most famous for, of course.
Yeah.
But but yeah, go back to the Great Race though. It's tragic how we lost Natalie Wood. Um, but Natalie, of course, was one of these. And it's amazing to me that you had interacted. I would have goosebumps being around these women. Did you have goosebumps being around these women?
Actually, I didn't. I think the only one that kind of gave me the tingles was Audrey.
Yeah.
But as I said, you couldn't help but be in love with this woman. And but I knew well enough not to act like an idiot. I mean, by then I'd been in town for 7 years, so I'd met a lot of people. And of course, once you've met Elizabeth Taylor, I mean, not too many other women are going to impress you. So, but Audrey was different, and I had a special feeling for her. And so, of course, yeah, it's like when you're a kid and you bump into your crush, and yeah.
Talk about Natalie Wood. What was she like?
Well, I always think, like I say when I'm talking to Lana, the thing I miss about Natalie is that wonderful laugh that she had, and she would laugh at some of the silliest things that you wouldn't normally think are terribly funny, but they meant something to her. That's what I miss about her. And of course, seeing her on the screen, she was such a wonderful actress. But she was a really lovely lady and very gracious and generous and very kind to people. I mean, I never saw her treat anybody badly. I never heard any stories about, oh, Natalie was nasty to me or something. I never. She was, she grew up in the business, and so she knew. She, I think she
Yeah.
had the answers. Yeah, lovely,
Yeah.
lovely girl, beautiful girl. God,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I love Natalie Wood. It's funny, you mention these names and I'm like, it, you hear the story and I agree with it. These are people, they put their pants on one leg at a time like anybody else. And that's true. But these people had a special aura around them. And I love the fact that like you were right there, you got to see them on a personal level and see what they were like. Yeah, but
Daily. When you see somebody daily and you see them working and you see them, like I was sitting with Audrey talking. to her when Mr. Cukor came up and told her that they were going to have to use Marnie Nixon's voice for some of the notes. And Audrey was not thrilled with that. And for about 5 minutes, she was very, very quiet. And then all of a sudden, she just left it alone and ignored it, didn't pay any more attention to it. And she and I continued our conversation, and it was as though it never happened.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to jump into Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. You've done so many films here, and I'm not going to catch them all, but I do know that you've got a lot of stuff on IMDb where you're uncredited, and
Well, that's probably because I was dancing. Dancers never get any credit.
you know what? I think you should get credited. You know, when you say that, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me during the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about doctors and nurses, and I understand
Mhm.
that. I worked through it. I was a cleaner. I wasn't off. I was on the front lines of that.
Yeah.
And nobody talked about the cleaners.
Yeah.
And that always made me feel bad. But I remember there was one morning, because I work overnights. I get off work and I went to get a coffee someplace, a little coffee shop. And I said to the guy, and I said, "Wow, I said I need a coffee. I need to wake up, you know." And he was just opening. He said, "Just give me a moment to wake up and or open up, you know." And he asked me what I do, and I said, "Well, I work as a cleaner and had an 8 hour shift overnight." And he looks at me. He says, "This coffee is on the house."
Ah,
He says, "You guys never got the credit you
yeah.
deserve during this hassle that's going on out there with the pandemic."
Yeah.
And it just felt good that somebody noticed, you know,
Yes. Yes.
you know. So yeah, when I hear you're uncredited because you know what, you're an important part, not just of that film, but how the film looks.
Yes.
Because
True.
those dance numbers, let's face it, they need to be in sync. They need to be presented a certain way. And I gotta say, if Elvis Presley, you were the one male in his book,
Well, and if
I'd
you,
say you were credited somewhere, weren't you?
well, certainly by Elvis, if you see a picture of another fellow with Elvis, it's probably me. Because usually it was Elvis and a lot of women. In fact, I showed Elvis a picture. I think it was from Spin Out. And I
Hmm.
said, "Oh, look at this picture, Elvis. This is great. It's you and I by the swimming pool and all these beautiful girls." And he said, "Yeah, this is a lovely picture. I'm going to show this to the colonel." Well, the colonel liked it and said, "Oh, I'm going to use this as a poster for the film." And so they did, but they cut me out. So it's just Elvis with all the girls. But I have the original picture. In fact, when I do autograph shows, I have that picture to offer. So
I feel bad they cut you out, but
that's all right.
I'm glad Elvis never ever cut you out.
No,
Says something
he
about him.
he he was so good to me, really. But as I said, I made him laugh, and he wasn't too happy with some of those films. And so I was there. In fact, he wanted me to do the comeback special, and I said to him, "Elvis, I'm now not only getting billing for films, I'm getting single card billing, which means it's just my name on the screen, nobody else's. And you want me to come in and just stand next to you and move my fanny?" And and of course he would give me that look, and of course then I would think, okay, he kept me working when I was raising Sean by myself, and So I'd say, okay, but don't feature me, because I don't want to be thrown back into the dancers. Because by then, too, not only was I acting and getting billing, I had become a choreographer myself. So I was
Mhm.
choreographing a lot of films at American and International. That's another interesting story, too. Um, so he said, okay, I'll do that. But there were a couple of times that he did have me right there in the center of everything. I have pictures of the two of us where he's just laughing and I'm giving him the dirtiest of looks. But I couldn't be mad at him. How can you possibly be mad at Elvis Presley, for God's sakes? No, no. By the same token, if he would come around to talk to me and the boys, the Memphis Mafia, would start to gather and he would give him a signal, don't come near us. And we would just sit and talk, and we'd be like you and I sitting and talking, and you wouldn't think it was Elvis Presley. It was just some kid from Memphis that had some gripes that he wanted to vent, and that was it.
Well, let's get into detail here on Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Boy, I love this movie. What an odd movie. I love it. This was a beautiful Criterion release. And
Hmm.
yeah, uh, talk about a
Oh
party
God,
film,
yeah,
And Roger Ebert, the screenwriter,
yeah.
and Russ Myers. Russ Myers is a very interesting fellow. And it's like he went against the grain. At least this is my interpretation. Rebellious against the system. What was your take on Russ Myers?
It's funny you should ask this because we were just talking about this yesterday. I found Russ Meyer to be one of my favorite directors. He
I
was
don't
he,
doubt it.
he was gentle, he was sensitive, he knew how to communicate with actors. He reminded me a lot of George Cukor,
Oh, nice.
the way he handled everything. And the Beyond the Valley of the Dolls was supposed to be a sequel to Valley
Oh,
of the Dolls.
yeah.
All of a sudden, across the courtyard from where I used to live, because I used to live in Rudolph Valentino's old home, Falcon Lair, and across the canyon road, Cielo Drive, is where the Manson murders took place. And this happened all of a sudden. We got a call, come in, bring your scripts. You're going to get a new script. So we went into the offices. This was at 20th Century Fox. I had a choice of doing that film or Myra Breckenridge. And the story of why I chose Valley of the Dolls is another long story, so I won't bore you with that. So we went in and we were told, everyone's going home for 2 weeks. Give us your script. And when you come back, you'll have a new script. You'll have time to learn everything. We're all very confused by this. It's a very confusing time. It's a very upsetting time because really all of Hollywood was shook by this horrible event that took place. So when we came back, of course, it was a whole different thing. And many of us were not too thrilled with it. I know I wasn't. I wasn't happy. In fact, I took a friend of mine to the premiere and I turned to Barbara and I, this was one of my scenes, and I turned to her and I said, I think this is the end of my film career. And she said, well, it's not that bad. And I said, well, I don't know. I think this is pretty horrible. Well, of course, come to find out, this is a film that's become a cult classic. I get more residuals from this film than any other film. And Dolly Reed told me, this was a few years ago, she said, You know, Christopher, they show this film at midnight screenings, and that one line of yours at the party, the entire audience says, "And you're a bitch," all at the same time. I said, "Oh, you're kidding." She said, "No, if there's ever another midnight screening and I know about it, you and I are going." Oh, and I'll tell you something else about Dolly, how wonderful she is. I think it was maybe two autograph shows ago. My son had driven me. I don't drive anymore. And I introduced her. I said, "Dolly, this is my son." And she says to Sean, "Young man, I just want you to know I've been in love with your father for the longest time." Isn't that nice?
Yeah. I should have dug these out and I didn't think of them. I have an autograph picture of Dolly because I've got her number because I've been in touch with her and her manager
Mm.
over the years, and they wanted to send an autograph to me, so they had contacted me, and her manager was a really nice lady as well, and I love Dolly, and
Ah,
yeah,
wonderful.
and
Yeah.
she is so radiant in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. It's hard to take your eyes off
Oh,
her, especially
yes.
those big wide eyes, and I had Marcia McBroom on here. I had her on here twice, once when I was at the station and once on Zoom. And talk about elegance, the earrings, and
Yeah,
oh
she's
boy, she was dressed to the nines. So
a lovely
cool.
girl. She really is. It's a
Yeah.
pity that you couldn't have my friend. We had worked together, oh, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times. Michael Blodgett, who
Hmm.
beheaded in the
Yeah.
film. But Michael was a very, very nice guy and a good actor too. So,
Yeah, he probably should have watched himself in that film.
well, yeah,
He ended up in such a bad position.
yes, yes, more ways than one. But nice
But he
guy.
was good. Yeah, he was great. Yeah, and of course, Superwoman.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
so bizarre, that third act.
yeah. I have to admit that um, many years ago, I'm afraid I was a bit of a snob about doing that film, uh, the beach movies, and
Mhm.
even the Elvis films. Because when I first got a call to do the first film with Elvis, Viva Las Vegas, I didn't want to do it. And I knew I had to work. I was raising my son by myself. He was an infant at the time. And I thought, oh boy, this is really something. And everybody said, "Why don't you want to work with Elvis?" And I said, "I've just worked with Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor, and I'm now working with Audrey Hepburn, and now you want me to work with Elvis Presley?" And I told this story to Elvis, and he just laughed. He thought it was wonderful because he didn't take himself seriously.
You've had quite the career. And of course, I marvel at the fact that you worked with Dolly Reed Martin, who whose name recognition's not up there with those, but I'm going to tell you, I remember when I first saw Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I was quite enchanted with her. And I love the music numbers in this.
Yes, yes, they're not, but for that sort of thing, I mean, that's not necessarily my favorite music, but yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, the movie, like I said, it came out the year my older brother was born, and but this is one of the things I love about the films like this. It gives me a chance, allows me an opportunity to see what the atmosphere was like back in these times and whatnot.
Yeah.
I can remember a bit of the 70s growing up because I was born in 72 and I have some memories of it. But the atmosphere, like I know this was of course filmed in 69, of course released in 70, and but you get that vibe. the what they call the swinging 60s, and you get all that. Um, what was the vibe like on set for this movie? It looks wild.
It was wild. And of course, during the whole shoot, we're witnessing Edie Williams putting the make on Russ Meyer. So we're watching that romance evolve. Yeah. And I was lucky enough that one of my makeup people happened to be Whitey Snyder. Now, I don't know if that name is familiar to you, but Whitey Snyder was the exclusive makeup man for Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And he was very particular about who he would work on because he didn't want people, picking his brain about Marilyn. And we got along beautifully. Like I said, even with Elvis, with everybody, I'm there, I do my job, and I mind my own business. And I don't delve into things. So, yeah.
Let's talk about the autograph shows because I mentioned to you before we started recording, I've lived here my whole life, and I'm friends with actress Lisa Langlois, who had just moved from Los Angeles back to Toronto. She lived there for over 30 years, and she's from Toronto. And she had asked me what was stopping me from traveling, because I'd mentioned I never traveled, never been outside New Brunswick other than Prince Edward Island, and she says to me, she says, I'm doing a horror film convention in Toronto. And she invited me to assist her at it. Now, I had a sense of excitement and trepidation. Excitement is I'm being invited to, because I've known Lisa since the 80s. So it's like, I'm being invited to assist her at this. I can't say no. But the same token, I was worried about flying and worried about being homesick. Because I get homesick just going from Fredericton, where I am here, to neighboring cities. So I was like, what am I going to be like going to Toronto? Well, it was my first time on a plane, and it was amazing my reaction to it because it was like going on a bus. It was like a bus in the sky. I've actually quite taken to it. And when I got in Toronto, it's quite a bit bigger than this. It was like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. I'm not in Kansas anymore. It's like the big tall buildings. And it was the first time I'd ever been outside New Brunswick and not felt homesick. I want to make Toronto my home. I love it there. She met with me and she taught me how to use the subways and the streetcars, and she got me well schooled. I've been going, with the exception of 2020 because of some interrupting event that everybody was dealing with. Um, I've gone there every year since. I love Toronto. And she helped me get my passport because I went to Chiller in New Jersey. It was my first time in the States. And went to assist her at that. And so I love the conventions, and I've got a lot of autographs here. And I never met Dolly, but I got one of hers through the mail, and she had contacted me about that. But I hope to meet her at some point. But here's a question I ask anybody who's done conventions. What's the most unique thing you've ever been asked to sign?
Oh boy. There's been a lot of things because I fit into so many different categories.
Hmm.
Of course, when they do Elvis, I'm invited for that. When they do Batman, I'm invited to that because I did Batman. When they do dancing or beach films, I'm invited to that. Um, what else? There's several different cat westerns because I did a western series. Um, and people have asked me to sign a lot of strange things. I mean, coats and chests. Um,
People have them tattooed on them.
yeah, this one girl said that she was gonna, if I signed it, she was then gonna have the tattoo artist do that. And I said, "Oh, don't do that." And she said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because in a few years you'll be very, very sorry, you know. Um, what you think you want today is not what you're going to want 10 years from now." So I, I said to her, "I'll tell you what, don't have it tattooed. And when I do another show, come back and I'll sign it again." So,
I don't have any tattoos, so I'm happy just getting either my Blu-rays signed or
uh,
get a picture off the table. And you guys usually have wonderful pictures anyway, Um, but no, I love the conventions and I don't know how many of them that you get to do. Is there any places that like not even necessarily convention wise, but in the world that you've been that has been a favorite spot for you?
well, I think there's certain parts of Canada, but here in Hollywood, the Hollywood show is very big.
Hmm.
I do want to do the chiller, but I've never been asked. Um, I'm hoping that they'll ask me sometime because I would like to do that one.
I
And
can put you in touch with the people, the promoters.
yes,
Yes, I'll tell you, Eddie Mika is one of them, and what a nice guy. Because when Lisa invited me to his sister, like she had called me and said she's going to be at this. Here's what a stand-up guy Eddie was, and he's one of the promoters. I went on their Facebook page and I mentioned that I was friends with Lisa, and I mentioned what she was like and what they can expect and whatnot, and gave her a good write-up to for the fans. And Eddie sent me a private message, and he said that he let me in for free. He didn't have to do that, but he said you're friends with Lisa. He said just come in. You got VIP for the event.
that's nice.
And I thought that was so cool. And we're both cat lovers, so I met him. And I'll tell you something else he did too that was really cool. My younger brother watches Skittles, my cat, while I'm away. And I
Mhm.
always try to bring my brother an autograph because when our parents were terminally ill, he took care of them as well. And William Shatner was at this at Chiller, and he of course had a huge lineup. And I asked Eddie, I said, "How much is William's autograph? Do you know?" Because I wanted to make sure I was standing in line for, and I had the cash and anyway, he did not know, and I mentioned uh, because I was going to get him to sign something for my brother, and I get a picture taken with him. That way, we both benefit. And I mentioned this to him, and he put me to the front of the line.
Mhm.
He didn't have to do that. So this is the people that we're dealing with here for Chiller. It's a nice convention, so I am going to see what I can do to put you in touch.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing my first Comic Con in May. I'm going to be with the Livingston brothers, Barry and Stanley. I
I've had
did.
Stanley on here.
I love Stanley.
Yeah.
He's just wonderful. We often are put together. I did only one episode of My Three Sons, and I didn't work with either of the boys. I worked with Don Grady, but
Hmm.
Stanley and I got along very well. In fact, the guy who's in charge of the Hollywood show called me up and he said, "I don't know what you did to Stanley Livingston, but he has asked to have you next to him the next time he's here. Do you mind doing that?" I said, "No, you can put Stanley and I together always, as far as I'm concerned. So we are going to be together in Pasadena uh,
Hmm.
in May. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to it because Comic Con is it's really big here in California. So I'm looking forward to that.
I was to the Toronto Comic Con once, and my dad passed away in 2022. He had ALS for 8 years,
Oh God.
but I remember I got him laughing even despite the disease because one of the people I met at Comic Con was Steve Urkel himself,
Hmm.
Jaleel White, and what I've shown my parents the things I got at Comic Con. When I showed that picture of Jahil White with those pants way up here, and this is my dad laughed because he thought that was so funny that I met
Yeah.
this guy who's now a grown man, but I remember that just dad was just tickled that I met Steve Urkel, and that was the only time I'd done a Comic Con. But I'm hoping to do more. I'd like to do more in the States, it's a little pricier because our dollar is not worth as much, but
Well, especially
had,
now. Yeah.
yeah,
Terrible. Yeah.
but I had fun at Chiller. It was the first what time Sybil Shepherd had done a con, and I met her, and it was an amazing time. I'll see what I can do to put you in touch with them because they are really nice people, and it is a really nice con. It's going on. They do that one twice a year, April and then sometime in the fall, and they get a great lineup here in April. Chiller. So anyway, yeah, I think you would very much like it there. So.
Oh, I'm sure I would. I love the fans. I really do. At first, when I was first approached many years ago about doing this, I thought, oh no, but I'm usually that way about everything in the beginning. No, 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 no. And then all of a sudden I do it and it becomes something that's one of my favorite things. So, yeah.
Especially if you do them with Dolly, that's got to be something.
I'll have to send you a picture of Dolly and I together.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, before we start closing off, I was wondering, do you have you got a web page?
Mhm.
Would you like to promote that? And you mentioned your book. Promote that as well, and where people can get that.
Well, it's not out yet.
Oh, it's
My
not. Okay.
no, excuse me, no, my manager he got me going on it again. I had been writing this. I mean, it's all essays, really.
Mhm.
It's not, I don't want anybody to think it's one of those things of, I went to such and such a school at age 10. It's none of that nonsense. It's all about, well, for instance, the stories that I've just told you.
Mhm.
It's about the productions that I've worked on, the people that I've worked with. And through that, that's how you get to know more about me. But
Mhm.
I don't like all those things about, yes, my favorite food is banana cream pie or something. No, it's not my style. Anyway, had been doing a series for 5 years, and I didn't have much time to do anything. I couldn't approach publishers and so on and so forth. I mean, you're getting up at 4 in the morning and sometimes not getting home until 6, 7 o'clock at night. So what time do I have to do promotion? But this manager decided, this stuff is too good to just let it sit. We've got to put this in book form. And so he has done that. And now it's been taken by a friend of mine who has a friend in publishing. In fact, he owns his own publishing company. So we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely had like I find it quite striking the people you've met and that we see them from a certain way when we see them on screen. I love hearing the stories about people that have actually been that close to them, and we hear about what they were like as human beings,
Mhm.
and that, yeah, these are living, breathing people, So,
Mhm.
yeah, but nonetheless, I hope to meet you at a convention at some point, and I know I'll bring this with me when it happens.
I get a
Well,
lot of CD covers and album covers and stuff like that sent to me and asking me to sign it and all. Um, it kind of annoys me that people will send things in the mail and want you to sign it and send it back. Where if I go to the conventions, of course, they pay for, these signatures and photographs and such. So, so far, I haven't had the heart to write back and say, "Hey, look, this is uh, this is the way I have a little savings going here."
hmm yeah. And plus, there's a lot of people that sell them. I don't sell any of my autographs. And I've told Lisa, I said, always personalize it.
Yeah,
Always
yeah,
personalize it. Me
yeah,
personally, I like it when they personalize. I like it when they sign my name on it.
yeah.
You know, to me, it's a nice, beautiful connection. I always love that. So that's one thing I've always told people. I said, personalize it. You know, I don't agree with people getting a bunch of stuff signed and then running off and selling them. I know there's
Yeah,
people out there. Yeah.
I see my stuff on the internet, and it annoys me. They're
Yep.
getting money for something that I should have asked for some, if you're going to get $40 for a picture of me, shouldn't I get at least 20 of that?
Well, like I said, if I never even thought of it. Had I figured it out, I would have dug out the Dolly autograph because
Um,
I've still got it. I've still got that's priceless to me,
well,
but
she's a priceless person, so you have
oh,
every,
I love Dolly. Yeah, she is a Dolly.
she really is. She really, really is. I
And
have
she
some very,
loves her dogs.
yes, well, and she knows I'm an animal person too. I have some wonderful stories about Dolly, but we can't tell them on this podcast.
That's okay. My podcast is about celebrating people. I don't get into stuff that people don't want to share, and I'm really good with that. But nevertheless, I thank you for coming on here today, and I'm sorry we couldn't dive into everything. It's such a long list of credits, you know. But this is, of course, turning 55 this year.
Is it really 55? God.
55, and you are
Oh,
39 years old. I can't believe that. How'd that happen?
oh God. How old was I in 1970?
I don't know.
What?
I'm going to be 53 this year. Come July, I'll be 53. And I'm starting to really feel my age. Because last year, in January of 2024, I had a retina operation, and I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, and that went well. I got followed up this year and it went well. But it's like, man, I'm starting to feel my age now.
Listen, you have no right to say that. You realize that in November I will be 88 years old. So,
I thought you were 39. I
no.
bet you can still dance, though.
I did a dance solo on the series that I was working on. I think I was 80, I think I was 82. And yeah, that was everybody gathered and said, Jesus, can you believe this guy? He's in his 80s and he's doing this dance solo. Yep.
You know what? It's a blessing to reach those ages, and you're probably in much better shape than I am, I'll tell you that. So
I'm in better shape than my son. He should take better care of himself. Yeah.
you know what? I'm looking to take into taking better care of myself too, but I find with me as I work in two different cleaning jobs and so working and sleeping, and I do these when I get the opportunity, and I love doing these, so this is also awesome. So I thank you so much. I know we've been at this for a couple of years, and we finally got this worked out. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the fact, and I gotta mention Tommy Kovac from Splat from the past because
Oh, he was a wonderful interviewer. He was
yeah.
very gracious. Yeah, I enjoyed his. And believe me, I've done many of these, and his name pops up. I do remember him. Another fellow, Steve Robello. I don't know if you know who that is,
I
but
don't know him. Tommy and I talk regularly because Tommy does a lot more of these than I do because he's got the time to do it. Whereas with me, where I'm working between 70 and 80 hours a week. So
uh,
yeah. So I don't when I schedule these, I gotta make sure it counts, you know, and in terms of my time. But so I'm really happy we were able to make this work out. But but Tommy always when anniversaries come up, he'll send me a list of names. But he doesn't just send me a list. He mentions people that he had a good experience with and
mhm.
who he thinks I would connect well with, you
He
know.
also he mentioned he said something about there's so much here. Could we do another one sometime? And so I'll say the same thing to you that I said to him. Make a list, go through the website, make a list of the things that we missed that you're interested in, and do it again
I
sometime.
would love to. Yes, absolutely. I've had guests back on here before. Absolutely. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So open
Um,
up the website and make notes, and because really we've only scratched the surface.
we have. Yes, we have. Well, I know at in about 45 minutes. My brother's right now using my car because the battery went in his, so he'll be around here about 45 minutes to pick me up, and then we'll drop him off at his apartment, and then I'm off to my first of three locations for cleaning. So
Um,
yeah, luckily my our building, I have a coworker in that one, so but
I
but
gather since you don't do a lot of traveling, you've not been to Alberta?
I have not, although I admire the Premier Danielle Smith, though. I admire how there's a lot of talk about the tariff situation,
I know, I know.
and here's what I'm going to say about that. We wouldn't be in a tariff situation if our former prime minister, I'm talking about who I like to call Trudeau, didn't put us there. I'm not a fan of his, and I'm not a fan of the guy that's moved into his place on unelected. I'm not
Oh,
a fan. I am I'm not liberal or conservative, but I am going to vote for Pierre Poilievre for the next election, and because I like what he stands for. I like how he commit, and I met him at a rally, so I've never attended a political rally before. I don't agree with the tariffs, but at the same token, I can't sit here and say, oh, this is all Trump's fault because we were put there by our narcissistic leader,
hmm.
Trudeau, as I like to call him.
Yeah. I never
But
understood all that until I think it was 2 years ago. I was in Alberta at the Blue Suede Music Festival. I was the guest VIP, and of course, it's an Elvis event,
mhm,
and they treat me very well. I've done their festival twice, and lovely, really lovely people. So
yeah,
after the thing was done, we were talking about Puerto Vallarta, which is where I used to live. And I love Vallarta. I have a 60-year history with Vallarta. And of course, I told you I used to live across the street from Elizabeth Taylor's house in Vallarta. Anyway, the woman that's in charge of that, she and her husband and another couple who's an ETA, which is an Elvis talent artist, and his wife came down to Vallarta, met me in Vallarta. I celebrated my birthday there, and we spent, I think, a week and a half where they stayed that long. And we were then able to talk about all different kinds of things like politics and so on. And I had not heard anything about Trudeau until I finally got into this conversation. And I remember Trudy saying, Christopher, we think about Trudeau like you think about Trump.
Yeah.
So
You
then
want me to tell you something that Trudeau had said recently that really ticked me off? Um, because they're using Trump's name against Polyev, and Polyev is not a Trump person either. Polyev is Canada First, but this is what they're going on, you know? And there has been situations here where Canadian citizens have been booing the U.S. anthems at hockey
oh
games.
yeah, yeah.
Now, Polyev has instructed people, don't do this. Trudeau, and I heard this come out of his mouth, encourage people to boo the American anthem. And I'm like, what a disgusting pig.
That's not right.
No, it's not. And you know what? I've had a lot of guests on here from the US. I will not boo the US anthem. And in terms of, I mean, I'm all for buying Canadian goods, but I'm not going to ignore something that's US based. Like Danielle Smith, the premier of Alberta, her response to Donald Trump was, okay, you have issues with the border. Let's see what we can do to solve that. Whereas Trudeau and Freeland and the rest of the clown circus were busy throwing insults at Trump. I'm like, what are we, five? You're not helping matters. You're throwing gasoline on fire. Whereas Danielle Smith, there's a reason Danielle Smith is getting respect from Trump because she's trying to come up with solutions. Now, Poilievre's not a fan of what Trump's doing either, but Poilievre is also um, trying to handle this as well as he can. Um, so I think I'm not a fan of Trudeau, not a fan of Carney. Sorry. And I'm surprised at how many people, I've had friends cut me off because of this. And I'm like, I don't follow mainstream media when it comes to this stuff. I listen to independent media, whether it's the pleb, over opinionated, unacceptable fringe, a lot of these platforms online that I listen to. I've heard Joe Rogan speak about it. I've heard Jordan Peterson speak about it. I've heard Kevin O'Leary speak about it, Piers Morgan, Tucker Carlson. And then I get people attack me and say that I'm listening to the wrong stuff. Well, I'm not going to listen to CBC talk about it because I've heard twice, and it's been proven to me on these very podcasts I listen to, where CBC had taken something that Pierre Poilievre said and they doctored it up to make it sound like he said something else to smear him. And then the podcaster would play the clip in its actual context. And I'm like, I can't trust the mainstream media.
No,
Nope.
no, I don't
Nope.
deal with it either. Just
And
don't.
by the way, I think you have a great country, whether a person likes Trump or not.
Uh,
I will not boo your anthem. Yeah, I never will. I think you're one of the reasons why the country's great. Because people like you and Dolly and Audrey Hepburn and Elvis Presley and all these wonderful people that you've worked with, they make the U.S. united to me, you know.
oh yeah,
So,
listen, this country has been quite something way before Trump ever got involved. So yeah,
mhm. Yeah.
and I'm just hoping that not too many people will be injured during this term that he may have.
Yep.
Uh, he's
Yep.
a dangerous man. That's all there is to it. I loved what my Canadian friends in Alberta said to me. Um, don't worry. We still love you. We want you to come back, and so yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I'll say it. I'm not going to boo anybody's anthem. You know, to me, that's just third grade level of mentality
Yeah.
is what that
Well,
is.
as
Yep.
you've already found out about me, if it's something that's distasteful or that leaves a bad taste in my mouth from previous experiences, I don't say anything.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
But with that said, it was wonderful having you come on here today and chat with me. And um, I love to have you come back. Absolutely.
okay, we'll make notes and we'll do it again.
We'll do that again. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
What do you want me to do?
Just state your name and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Python's Paradise.
Hmm.
Wow. That's all right. But how do you want me to
Just do it like just freely.
all right. Well, this is Christopher Riordan telling you that you really should follow Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. I think it's constricting.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And if for some weird reason that Dolly Reed Martin happens to be hearing this because she likes to
Ah,
hear my voice, we love you, Dolly.
yes,
We love
indeed.
Dolly. We
She
love
knows
Dolly.
that I do. She knows that. Yeah. She's so dear, really. She came by my table the last time and she said, "What is this magazine here?" I said, "Oh, that's Films of the Golden Age." She said, "Well, there's an article on you." I said, "Yeah, it's quite an article." I said, "It's 17 and a half pages." She said, "You're kidding." And I said, "No." She said, "I never got that." I said, "Well, I don't know." So she said, "Okay, I want one of these. How much is it?" And she would not let me give it to her. She insisted on paying for it. She's a sweetheart. I love her.
Absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
all the lovely ladies that I've come in contact with. I've had some really lovely, lovely people come into my life. And by the same token, some very interesting men as well. I mean,
Hmm.
Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, James Dean, Elvis Presley, Johnny Ray. So, yeah.
We'll have a lot to talk about on our next chat. So
Okay.
absolutely. Christopher, thank you so much for blessing me with your presence today. And I wish you good health and happiness and
Thank you.
keep dancing.
Or as my friends always say, keep up with the high kicks. Yes, I was known for high kicks.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. I bet you could still do them too.
Well, I haven't done one in a couple of weeks, but yeah.
There
Anyway,
you
we'll
go.
take care of Canada. And listen, if they ever ask me back in Toronto, we'll be able to have a coffee.
You know what? I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I'll mention you to Chiller.
Okay.
And yeah, because they got about 75 guests there for April right now. So it's a huge one. So I'll
Yeah.
reach out to them because they might not even be thinking about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And it's one of those things where it's like, why didn't we?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I could see them taking a liking to that. So it's a great con. I had a good time at it.
Good. Glad.
Absolutely.
I'm also speaking next month. There's an organization called the Brotherhood of the Popcorn. Have you heard of it?
No, I didn't know the popcorn had a brotherhood.
And they have asked me to come and speak about the making of My Fair Lady. So, yeah,
There you go.
yep. So,
Well, well, Christopher, you have yourself a wonderful, blessed day.
thank you. You as well.
Absolutely,
All
absolutely.
right.
Take care and God bless.
Until next time.
You take care. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Enjoy those dolls in the valley.
Yeah, there's only one valley of the doll I'm concerned about. That would be Dolly.
Beyond the dolly.
Yeah,
Beyond the valley of the dolly.
there you go.
With that said, you take care.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye. Bye bye.